Okay, please make sure you're sitting so you can see the screen. Actually, yes, close enough to 3 o'clock now. So, for many years we've been reading out suttas, and every time I read out those suttas I always complain about the translation. So, instead of complaining about things, we actually do something about it. So, during the rains retreat at Bodhinyana Monastery, we always have a sutta class for people who are resident there. And so over the years I've been reading out a compilation of passages from the suttas, and it was based on Venerable Nyanatiloka's classic text, The Word of the Buddha, where he took some of the most important of the suttas and put them all together in one little book. And the translation was so old, and in many cases I thought so accurate and also so unwieldy as well, that I decided to do a retranslation, and quite like a heavy retranslation. For those of you who ever do read the suttas, you'll notice there's so much repetition, whereas in English we would never have that type of repetition at all. And it may be a cultural curiosity, but when you actually teach with all those repetitions, it does take away people's attention from the real message. And also there are some similes of chariots and kings and fourfold armies, which don't really match with the reality of today. So some of those similes I've adapted, keeping the message but changing some of the words, to try and make this teachings of the Buddha far more alive. And of course also some of the translations of some of the key words, which you will find here are different than what you're used to, what you read in the suttas you have so far, because that was a translation of Bhikkhu Bodhi. And even at the time I disagreed with some of those translations. You can get much deeper into the meaning of the word with better translations. And of course, one of those translations you must be used to by now is the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path, Samma Samadhi, where people continue to use the word concentration, which I think is totally counterproductive, and just the wrong translation has caused so much difficulty for people in their meditation. So I've called it stillness. There's also many other changes, such as in the Second Noble Truth, the cause of suffering. We call it craving, but craving is far too hard for the word which it really means, and so I've changed that to wanting. So a few little words being changed here make the Dhamma really start to come alive, which I hope you're going to enjoy. So for the next sutta classes which I'm going to do, Ajahn Brahm is doing his own stuff. The ones I'm going to do, I'm going to be reading out from this these texts, The Word of the Buddha, retranslated, revised by Ajahn Brahm. So, and again, The Word of the Buddha, the whole text is, it is based on just the basic teachings of the Buddha, Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path. The core teachings. Because sometimes that we look at really a bit teachings which are a little bit on the edge, they're a bit interesting, but they're not really core teachings, which are the backbone of Buddhism. So these are the core teachings. So, having given that introduction explanation, I will now give the Namo Tassa and we can begin. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. Okay, still some of these things which I have to take out because I've been translating this as I go along. You see the first page, then the Lord addressed the bhikkhus thus. We don't have lords these days, so when I get back to the monastery, that will be then the Buddha addressed the monks thus. It is through not penetrating and not waking up to the Four Noble Truths that I, as well as you, have for a long time run on and gone round the cycle of rebirth and death. What are they? By not waking up to the noble truth of suffering, we have fared on. By not waking up to the noble truth of the origin of suffering, to the cessation of suffering, and to the path leading to the cessation of suffering, we have fared on around the cycle of rebirth and death. And I always like to pause there. It is by not penetrating and waking up to the Four Noble Truths, that's why we keep getting reborn. And you all know the Four Noble Truths? I'm sure you can recite them to me. But does that mean you're fully enlightened and you're not going to get reborn again? Obviously, there's something in those Four Noble Truths you haven't penetrated yet. You haven't truly woken up to. So this is a powerful statement. There's something in those Four Noble Truths which you haven't seen. That is why you get reborn. Powerful statement. This is something which you haven't penetrated yet. And what the Buddha said, so long as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in the 3 phases and 12 aspects was not... Is this actually the latest one? I think this looks like an earlier copy, but anyway, because I keep revising this and I take out some of this stuff here which is not really that useful. So long as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are, I take away out the 3 phases and 12 aspects, was not thoroughly purified, I did not claim to awaken to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in the world. Oh, this is the old version we've got here.
Okay, well, I think
Yeah.
it's the one you gave me.
Okay, yeah, no, there's another version which is much clearer. Because this is an example here. What it says here, so long as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects was not thoroughly purified in this way, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world, with its Devas, Maras and Brahmas, in this generation with its ascetics and Brahmins and Devas and humans. But when my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are in their 3 phases and 12 aspects was thoroughly purified in this way, then I claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world, with its Devas, Maras and Brahmas. What does that mean? Nothing very much, does it? Well, you should have said there what I say in the current version when I can find it. It would be, so long as my knowledge and vision of these Four Noble Truths as they really are was not thoroughly purified, I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment. Stop. So when I get to the real version later on, probably the next time, that will be taken out. Hopefully the rest is okay. I consider this Dharma that I've attained is profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful and sublime. This is good. This Dharma that I have attained, said the Buddha, is profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle to be experienced by the wise. So straight away, you can't just reason your way to understanding the Dhamma. And also, the other part I like here is when it says peaceful. It's something, when you do penetrate it, does not cause you to go to war with other people, or does not cause you to proclaim the correct Dhamma and wipe out everybody else who doesn't agree with you. The very nature of the Dhamma is peaceful, and it's unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle to be experienced, not to be logically deduced, but to be experienced by the wise. But this generation delights in attachment, takes delight in attachment, rejoices in attachment. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. And it's hard to see this truth. Oh yeah, this is the old version. That's a shame.
I tried to quickly put the other one on.
Yeah. Would you mind? Because I mean, this is
Find it up there, I'll put it on.
So, please, if you can just stay for a few moments, so I can find the other one. This is the older version. This is this one or this one? Working on it.
Maybe it's different.
Right here. This is the one here.
That's cool.
Even this one. Sorry.
give me the stick.
Okay. So,
It should still be up.
okay, yeah, okay, hopefully. So what actually, the reason I'm doing this is because when you do translations from one language into another, especially into Pali, one of the things which I was taught by Professor A.K. Warder was you never translate words, you translate phrases or sentences, because the phrase or the sentence is the unit of language, not the word. And a good example of that is when people who come to Australia and English is not their first language, where they have to try and translate things like, it was raining cats and dogs. And if they translate that word by word into their original home language, they start laughing, because of course to rain means it comes down from the sky, and it's never happened that a cat and a dog has fallen from the sky. From a tree maybe, but not from the sky. And so if you do translate word for word, you actually miss a lot of the meaning of what was meant to be conveyed. And that is one of the reasons why many of the translations you see in the text available in places like our library are all word for word translations. And sometimes they just miss something. And so instead of translating this word by word, I decided to translate it sentence or phrase by phrase. And that makes it much more interesting. And it does. People who have heard this say it really comes alive. So let's see if we can get it right this time. Where's it gone? Word of the Buddha. Should be this one, yeah. Well, where was it gone again? Not this one, there's too many of them.
Yeah,
Oh, there we go. It's this one here, I think.
this one, but I think this is
Okay.
the Buddha.
Okay. Okay, great. So, we're going to page 5 now. Hope you can see page 5. We got, said then the Buddha addressed the community. Have you got that? I did this, try to save paper. I should have printed it out. This is much better. Got it? Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. So the Four Noble Truths. It's actually quite helpful that you saw the first version, and this is actually in a much improved version, which you can read now. Then the Buddha, not the Lord, then the Buddha addressed the community, not the monks, the community. Otherwise, people think these teachings are just for monks. Number one, it admits bhikkhunis, it admits laymen, laywomen. So you can see the little translation here just makes it much more inclusive. Then the Buddha addressed the community thus: it is through not fully understanding and penetrating the Four Noble Truths that I, as well as you, have experienced the cycle of rebirth and death for a very long time. Because of not fully understanding the noble truth of suffering, we have experienced the cycle of rebirth and death by not fully understanding the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the path leading to cessation of suffering, that we have for a long time experienced the cycle of rebirth and death. I think hopefully you can see that's a far better translation, much more punchy. And so long as my penetration and insight into these Four Noble Truths as they really are was not thoroughly complete in 3 phases and 12 aspects, then I did not claim to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in this world. But when my penetration and insight into these Four Noble Truths as they really were was thoroughly complete in their 3 phases and 12 aspects, then I declare to have awakened to the unsurpassed perfect enlightenment in the world. And so what are these 3 phases and 12 aspects? They come now. This is the noble truth of suffering. That's one. What it actually is. Suffering is to be fully understood. It's a powerful saying, not to be escaped from, but to be understood. Not to be vanquished, but to be known, fully understood. And even little things, like I was saying yesterday in the meditation, whenever you have a pain in the body, understand it first, really get to know it, and then it can vanish. Not to try and get rid of it, but to understand it. So suffering, this is noble truth of suffering, to be fully understood and to have eventually realize you have fully understood it. And the noble truth of the origin of suffering, wanting, which causes rebirth. Craving is just a very extreme form of wanting. This is all types of wanting, even wanting for good things. So the origin of suffering, wanting, causing rebirth. That's, you know what the noble truth is. And wanting, the origin of suffering, is to be abandoned. Not suppressed, but to be abandoned. And wanting, the origin of suffering, has been abandoned. This is the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, extinguishing that wanting. And realizing the end of wanting, the cessation of suffering, is to be realized. And the end of wanting, the cessation of suffering, has been realized. And lastly, this is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. The Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the cessation of suffering, is to be developed. The Noble Eightfold Path, the way to the cessation of suffering, has been developed. So those are the 3 phases for each one of the Four Noble Truths, to know what it is, and understand its purpose, and then fulfill that purpose for the 4 factors of the 4 Noble Truths. Thus, in regard to things unheard before in this generation, there arose in me vision, knowledge, wisdom, true knowledge, and light. And then I considered this Dharma has been awakened to. This Dharma that has been awakened to is profound, hard to see, hard to understand, peaceful and sublime, unattained by mere reasoning, subtle to be experienced by the wise. But this generation delights in attachment to a self, not just attachment. This is a core problem. Because when it means attachment in Pali, it's always attached to what? And it's to a self. But this generation delights in attachment to a self, takes delight in attachment to a self, and rejoices in attachment to a self. It is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely, the empty process of cause and effect, dependent cessation and origination. Now, before you had specific conditionality, which many people wouldn't understand what the hell that means. But putting a real accurate description of that, it means the empty process of cause and effect. And also I mentioned dependent origination. But it's not just origination, it's dependent origination and cessation. So this is having a translation which is actually putting the meaning which anybody who understood those things in the time of the Buddha would have instinctively understood. Furthermore, it is hard to embrace this truth, namely the stilling and disappearance of the will, the relinquishing of everything that has been acquired, the destruction of wanting, everything fading away, cessation, nibbana. There are beings with little dust in their eyes that are wasting through not hearing this Dhamma. There will be those who will understand this Dhamma. So, it was actually quite fortuitous. Maybe the Devas were messing around today that you saw the first translation, which is the standard version, which you read in the books. This is actually the more accurate translation of those parts of the Four Noble Truths. especially just, this is powerful, it is hard to embrace this truth. I've been trying to teach this for years. The stilling and disappearance of the will. The relinquishing, otherwise called letting go. The relinquishing of everything that has been acquired. No more attainments, please. The destruction of wanting. Everything. I mean everything, including you, fading away. Cessation, nibbana. So, my understanding is, in the time of the Buddha, when the Buddha said this, that's what they would have understood. And that's really powerful and really hard-hitting. Any comments or questions? Yes?
Why is cause and effect empty?
Aha! It is because if it was something in it, it would never be allowed to stop, to finish, to end. There is something in science which is a fundamental law of physics, the conservation of mass energy. Things can't disappear, they can just change their form. And that is something which is a very powerful philosophical truth. It just applies to science as it applies to everything else. So if there was something in the middle of cause and effect, then there could never be any ending, nor could there be a coming together from zero. For many years, even in science, because of understanding this from the Buddha's teachings, I always mention that it's possible, and it makes a lot of sense to me, that this physical stuff in this universe, mass energy, how could it have come from nothing? It can only come from nothing, if the sum total of mass energy in the universe was absolutely zero. It cancels out. And there is such a thing which we know as negative energy, and I'm not talking about sort of emotional stuff. I mean real hard physical energy, mass, which is negative. And a good example of that from people who've done school physics is potential energy. Anything which has got mass in a gravitational field, it takes energy to move that into a freedom from that gravitational field. It has a negative energy component. And I thought that was very smart for me to figure that out. And was about 6 months ago, somebody sent me an email saying, I think it was maybe Cherry, may have sent me the email, but she's asleep. She's been working very hard. Poor old Cherry. Oh, I think poor old Cherry. She was just in Jhana. Cherry, I think you sent me an email that some scientist somewhere had suddenly discovered the origin of the universe. And exactly what I said just now. And they were just saying they discovered this. I discovered this years ago. So this is when it's an empty process. Even mass energy is an empty process. Always changing. But if all the mass energy could just come together in the whole universe, it wouldn't explode in huge energy. It would just poof. It would all just cancel each other out. And become, the universe would be empty again. The empty universe, the zero-sum universe, coming from nothing, nothing now, and nothing in the end. To me, that is beautiful. There's nothing here. So that's the empty process. If there's something there, it goes on for eternity. Some people like eternity. Me, I like endings. The difference is Groundhog Day. The day goes on and on and on, again and again, 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 again. Would you like eternity? Eternal life? You get so bored after a few hundred years. So it's best to have an ending. And you can only have an ending if there's nothing there in the middle. The empty process. Cause and effect. Okay. Any other questions? Because this is heavy stuff here. This goes to the core stuff. Where it says conditioned phenomena, sankhara, I translated that as will. And for a long time I've been wanting to translate the fourth khandha as will. And it was only with the encouragement of my compatriot in crime, Ajahn Brahm, who said, yeah, it does mean will. It does mean will. That's what it means. So you can actually see this stuff here, where you say that it is hard for a person to understand the stilling and disappearance of the will. Can you really get your head around that, what it means? And the reason why that's important, because that's exactly what happens to you in a deep meditation, in the jhanas. Temporary disappearance of your will. That's why you cannot experience this just by mere reasoning. You have to have the experience of these states. Otherwise you'll always be attaching to a self somewhere. The only reason why people find it hard to comprehend the stilling of the will is because that means that they go and they're attached to a self. Okay, no questions, amazing. Okay, here we go. So now, having had the prologue of the Four Noble Truths, now we have them one after the other. First of all, what is the noble truth of suffering? Rebirth is suffering. So, when you see a nice little bub being born, what does the baby do? Cry. And all the parents, oh, they're so happy. The baby knows what's going on. And when you go to a funeral service, have you ever looked in the box and the person who's dead is smiling and everyone else is crying? We get it the wrong way round. The baby knows what's going to go on, and the person in the box, free at last. Anyway, rebirth is suffering, aging is suffering, death is suffering. Sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief and despair is what you usually have. I have negativity and distress are suffering. Changing it around, negativity, and that was actually suggested to me by, what's her name, Melinda from Canada. Very beautiful translation. Negativity and distress are suffering. Experiencing what is unpleasant is suffering. Missing what is pleasing is suffering. Not getting what one wants is suffering. In short, the 5 components of existence, the 5 khandhas, that fully describe your body and mind are suffering. Instead of calling them the 5 aggregates, which is sort of okay, but components of existence, that actually is much more accurate, describing the 5 components of existence that fully describe your body and mind. They're suffering. And okay, that's in brief, now in full. And what is rebirth? In whatever type of beings, of whatever species of beings, there is rebirth coming to be, coming forth, the appearance of the khandhas, the acquisition of the senses, that is called rebirth. That might appear like an entry in the thesaurus, but this is why the Buddha wanted to make sure you understand that rebirth means rebirth and nothing weird or strange. Rebirth as everybody would understand the word. And what is aging? And whatever type of beings, in whatever species of beings, there is aging, decrepitude, broken teeth, grey hair, wrinkled skin, shrinking with age. I'm really hoping for shrinking of age. That's the only way I'm going to lose any weight. Decay of the senses, that is called aging. And what is death? In whatever type of beings, of whatever species of beings, there is a passing away, demise, a disappearance, a death, a dying, decease, the destruction of the khandhas, the discarding of the body, that is called death. Now you know that sometimes it's very hard for medicine to define death. Because I was reading an article about that sometimes that even today it's very difficult in some cases for a medical practitioner, even a specialist, to say, yeah, that person is dead. They may be in a coma. They may not be able to respond to a light in their eye. Or, interestingly, that one of the things I read that medical practitioners do, they actually shout into your ear, a loud noise. And that was supposed to be one way to find out if you are dead or not. I say that's interesting because in the deep meditations of jhana, it's the noise which penetrates more than anything else. So, it's very difficult for people to know what actually death is. But here, interesting, the Buddhist description of it, it is the destruction of the khandhas, the discarding of the body. More khandhas come up afterwards, but the ones you have are gone. And what is sorrow? Whenever by any kind of misfortune anyone is affected by something of a painful nature, sorrow, mourning, anguish, grief, unhappiness, that is called sorrow. What is lamentation? Whenever by any kind of misfortune anyone is affected by something of a painful nature and is crying out, ow, weeping, making much noise for grief, wailing, that is called lamentation. What is pain? Painful feeling results from bodily contact, that is called pain. What is unhappiness? Whatever mental painful feeling arises from the mind, that is called unhappiness. So you have pain, physical unhappiness, and mental unhappiness. What is distress? Whenever by any kind of misfortune anguish arises from something of a painful, unpleasant nature, that is called distress. What is experiencing what is unpleasant? Whoever has unwanted, disliked, unpleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, or mind objects, whoever meets with those who wish you harm, cause you discomfort or insecurity, that is called experiencing what is unpleasant. What is missing what is pleasing? Whoever has pleasant sights, sounds, smells, where are we going here? Sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, and mind objects. Whoever encounters well-wishers, those who provide you with comfort or security, such as family or friends, and then is deprived of such interaction or connection, that is called missing what is pleasing. And what it all comes down to is not getting what you want. In being subject to birth, this is what the Buddha said here. This desire arises, oh, that we were not subject to birth, that we might never be reborn. But this cannot be gained by desire. That is not getting what one wants. And it's interesting the Buddha put that as an example of not getting what you want, because, I don't know, in my life as a monk, so many people have come up to me and said, this is going to be my last life. I'm not going to get reborn anymore. I said, why? How do you know that? I said, because I don't want to. That's not good enough. You can't just desire not to get reborn. It's the desire, the wanting, is what causes rebirth in the first place. And not wanting is another form of wanting, and you go round and round and round and round. And lastly, in being subject to aging, to disease, to death, to sorrow, lamentation, pain, negativity, and distress, they might want, oh, that we were not subject to such things, that we may not come to these things, but this cannot be gained by wanting. That is not getting what one wants. And the last of these is, when it calls the truth of suffering, is the 5 components of existence, the khandhas. And how in particular are the 5 components of existence suffering? They are as follows. The body, instead of putting Vedana as feeling, I'm now preferring the word experience. Experience always comes with a positive or negative affection. Either you enjoy it or you don't enjoy it, but the real meaning of the Vedana is actually experience. It means what is experienced. Perception, will, and other mental formations, that's the sankhara, and consciousnesses. You see the plural there? Because that 5th of the khandhas is not consciousness. That makes people feel that consciousness is the same as a self or a soul somewhere, and it misses the point that the Buddha pointed out very clearly in these suttas. There is not just one consciousness, but 6 different types of consciousnesses. And that just different way of perceiving the world, of course, changes a lot of our understanding of a self, a me, when it's consciousnesses rather than a consciousness, as you will find out in a few minutes. And how, in particular, are the 5 here, we've done those ones, the sankhara and consciousnesses. These are the 5 components of existence that are suffering. And that is called the noble truth of suffering. And this is from the next one. It starts off with lady, because this is a person asking an arahat bhikkhuni some questions. So, they called it lady. Maybe you should call it Aya or something. It might be better. Or venerable. It's got lady here. Yeah. This is in the Chulavedula Sutta. Is that fuel the same as these 5 components of existence, or is the fuel something apart from the 5 components of existence? because sometimes people start calling the 5 components of existence the upadana kanda, the 5 components of existence subject to attachment or subject to grasping. But it literally does mean the fuel hyphen components of existence. And so what is the upadana, the fuel? Because sometimes the word upadana can mean sort of grasping. But it means grasping in the way that an engine, a car engine, grasps and takes up the fuel, the petrol in your car, in order for it to burn and to create the thrust for your car to move. In particular, it is used when a flame of a candle takes up sort of the wax of the candle. It actually upadanas it. It is the fuel which actually drives things. And where in many translators first started calling upadana craving or grasping, it doesn't really match what the Buddha's trying to say. It does mean like a fuel, the thing which keeps things going, which drives your car, which keeps either delusion or this thing we call life going. It's fuel. So, is the fuel the same as these 5 components of existence? The fuel actually creates these 5 components of existence, keeps them going, or is the fuel something apart from the 5 components of existence? And as usual, that people say in a way which is, the question is wrong. Friend Visakha, that fuel is neither the same as the 5 components of existence, nor is the fuel separate from the 5 components of existence. It is the desire and wanting that is part of these 5 components of existence, the desire and wanting within the 5 khandhas. That is the fuel that sustains them. So within those 5 components of existence, there you find the wanting, the desire, the craving, which actually keeps the 5 components going, a self-sustaining process. Not fuel from outside, but fuel from within. This experience of life you're having now fuels the next experience of life. Now, any kind of body, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the body component of existence, the first khandha. Because sometimes it's not just human bodies, it's not just animal bodies, it's not just insects. Sometimes there are such things as ghosts and heavenly beings, and some people have seen those. They exist. Even those are what they call fine material bodies. They too are considered to be part of that first khandha. All bodies should be seen as they really are with correct wisdom. Thus, this is not mine. This I am not. This is not my permanent essence. When they say soul, soul has a lot of Christian meanings. And this is not Christianity, this is Buddhism. So a permanent essence is a far better translation of the word atta. Any kind of body whatsoever. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. Any kind of experience, Vedana, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior. Now the gross experiences which one may have, the painful ones, or watching movies, football team wins, or even the very subtle ones like in jhanas, all of those are called the experience component of existence. And all experience should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. You are not your experience. You don't even own it. It's totally out of control. Do you have a question? Yeah. Very much entangled, especially the desire and wanting is especially entangled with the 4th, called will. It's not separate, it's within the 5 components. And Suffuse a whole lot is not really an accurate perception of the process, because, as I was going to mention, when I finish with these 5 khandhas, these 5 components of existence, you see there's a lot of overlap. These aren't sort of sectioning off, the left, right, above, below, middle. You can't really section off. This is actually interacting. It's taken what we know as life and partitioning it. You can look at it as experience. You can look at it as a body stuff. You can look at it as perception. All life is perception in that respect. Will, as Schopenhauer used to point out, that is essential. And all consciousnesses. You can put everything into consciousnesses if you wish. But these aren't separate categories. These are overlapping categories. They have not an identity, but they have features which separate them. Because you have like consciousnesses. They have something in the 6 consciousnesses which is so similar they can be bundled into this thing which we call consciousnesses. All the different types of perception which we may have, the different types of experience which we may have. There's always something which is similar to them, like bodies. There's something in your body which you can see similar to, say, a dog's body or a cat. So that's why that we can bundle them into these components. So there's nothing. The most important part here is where it says that these 5 components of existence, even though they overlap, there's nothing outside of these. There's nothing which you can describe which is outside. And the wanting is part of the 5 aggregates, yes.
How can you say that it's not part of the 5 aggregates?
Because it's not. It is part of the 5 aggregates. It's part of the one which is now, and it creates the 5 aggregates which are coming next. So this is what he was saying. These 5 aggregates, the way the Buddha said, these 5 aggregates are fueled. What keeps them going? What drives them? It's a cause and effect process. What pushes it along? That is the wanting.
So in every experiential process, at some level you'll find wanting.
You find wanting there. Sometimes they're not wanting. If that happens, you're driving it forward. If there's no wanting, it becomes still. And eventually it can even stop. Anyway, any kind of perception, this is experience, any kind of experience, past, future, all experience should be seen as it really is with the correct wisdom. Thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. Any kind of perception whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the perception component of existence. All perception should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. Thus, this is not mine. This I am not. This is not my permanent essence. So, what does your perception belong to? Where does perception come from? It is not yours. It comes from conditioning, from brainwashing, from seeing movies, from seeing advertisements. Misunderstandings, yeah. Last night at the Kalyana Middle group, I gave a little exercise in perception. It was a simple little piece of paper. A few people got smiling because I caught them out. And what was written on that piece of paper, the first line is, you do not see. The next line, you do not see, the first line. Second line, what is there. The third line, you only see what. And the fourth line, what you want to see. There's 2 whats in there. And you get people to read it out aloud in a class, and they miss it every time. They read out, you do not see what is real, you only see what you want to see. where it actually says you do not see what is real, you see what you want to see. It's a very, it's a party trick, but it's incredible how often that works. It worked last night. The first 4 or 5 people. Yeah, Wayne got caught on that one as well, and so did Winston. So just a perception, just how it works. And of course, any psychologist, there's so many beautiful experiments done on perception and how. Number 1, it's unreliable. And number 2, it's not yours. Yes, I thought I'd get something from Chris.
Is there a place, with regard to perceptions, is there a place when you're meditating that is in between perceptions and non-perceptions, which is like spacing out, zoning out? But a place right in the middle between those two, in deep meditation?
No, you're always perceiving something. Or you are unconscious. Or by unconscious, or the other state, of course, is where you go into the cessation of perception. Which is
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah,
cessation of perception. There's only one way to get through to there, and that is just gradually through the jhanas and immaterial states. You can't suddenly just get non-perception.
No, that's what I mean, yeah. Non-perception, like the conception of non-perception is a perception.
Yeah, exactly. So this is actually...
But there's a place between the two.
No, this is where everything stops.
Oh.
I mean everything,
Yep.
which means there's no consciousness active at all.
Yep.
So you're not conscious of not perceiving. Everything stops.
Yeah, that's right. You cannot even get your mind around the experience of it.
The only way you can get through to that is actually through the jhanas, all the jhanas. You have to go, there's only one way through there. But that's another totally different sort of topic.
Okay, thanks, Kante.
Yeah. So this is actually what perception actually is, and how very often we appropriate perception as being the truth, as being mine. And how many people have been tricked by perceptions. And you think it's true, you find out later on it wasn't. But that is, it's not a problem at all, because it's not your perception. Now, the 4th component of existence, any kind of will and the other mental formations. It is true that will is a main part of the 4th component of existence, and what makes up your body and mind, but there's other things as well based on the will, like thinking and other emotions that comes into the sankhara bucket. So any kind of will and other mental formations, whatever, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the will and mental formations component of existence. All will should be seen as they really are, with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. And if you understand that, you've got a long way to enlightenment. I mean, really understand it. I mean, it's not your will. You didn't decide to come here. You didn't decide to smile or shrug your shoulders. That's what the Buddha's saying. That's why it's hard to see. If you delight in the self or you attach to a self. Oh, sorry, you can't see it. So, and this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. You are not the controller. And lastly, any kind of consciousness whatever, should, whether past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the consciousnesses component of existence. All consciousnesses should be seen as it really is, with correct wisdom thus: this is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. So the one that's listening to me right now, that consciousness, that's not who you are. That changes all the time. There's nothing stable there. That's not who you are. You don't own it. It's not you. Da-da-da. Okay, can we... Any other questions from anybody about this? Yeah, come on, we should have a few questions. This is tough stuff.
Oh, sorry.
Because if I don't get any questions, it's obviously you're not understanding what I'm saying.
Ajahn Brahm, the Buddha was saying, this is very interesting topic, hearing the sutta, okay, this sutta, the Buddha was saying there are two ways, to gain enlightenment, that ending suffering. One is through the Four Noble Truths, this one, and the other one is through the law of dependent origination, the 12 links, So what is explained now, if you could refer to the 12 links, it's very much letting go, You could see it more clearly. I can see it very clearly, but it's too long to explain.
No.
The two ways to end that suffering. You refer to the law of dependent. Remember that, okay? Especially from the third to the 10th link.
Yeah, I have to correct you there, Eddie. There is only one way of ending suffering. Four Noble Truths, dependent origination, one and the same.
Yes, exactly, Ajahn Brahm. Yep.
So,
yes.
And it is not by mere reasoning. It is through practicing the Eightfold Path, which is coming up later. You hang out here for long enough, and you'll see dependent origination mentioned, because it comes up as an alternative to the second and third Noble Truths.
You can see it very clearly.
If you can, that's one of the things which will come up here, where I do dependent origination. Maybe, can we just scroll up to where to see if we can find dependent origination for him. Where is that? Oh, it's a long way. It should be up here somewhere. Okay. Oh no. Oh no, I haven't got it. Well, I should have it somewhere. No, I can't find it here. But there you find the Mahanidana Sutta on dependent origination. That is where Ananda says to the Buddha, this dependent origination is easy to see. And I don't know where it is, there somewhere. But the Buddha says, and this is how I translated it, steady on, Ananda, steady on. It is not easy to see. It is deep and hard to see. So when I, in the suttas, or most translations, they say, enough, Ananda, enough, Ananda. People don't say that these days. So I made a little bit of English out of it. Steady on, old chap. Steady on, old chap, I said. Steady on. To make it a bit more English. Anyway, where was I in this? I was down here. Down here somewhere. Noble Truth. Noble Truth of Suffering, here we go. 5 components of existence and consciousnesses. Now, one of the things with consciousness is... Oh, hang on, I've gone too far again. I shouldn't have done that one. Where we go? Noble Truth of Suffering, that's what we've just been doing. 5 components, here we go. Any kind of experience. Now, I mention this here because sometimes there is a tendency, and this actually... Oh yeah, you don't know either. It's page 9. Page 9, yeah. And any kind of perception, will, consciousness. Now I want to emphasize here, this is an accurate translation from the suttas. Any kind, not even one place, many places this is repeated. Any kind of consciousness, whatever. Past, future or present, one's own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near. All types of consciousness. So people who say, what about cosmic consciousness, or original consciousness, or underlying ground of all being consciousness? The whole purpose of this phrase is saying all consciousness, a whole lot. There's nothing outside, no consciousnesses which aren't included in this kanda. Because a lot of time, people, please excuse me, but it did come from a Hindu, trying to get some fundamental cosmic eternal consciousness which is exempt, from everything else. And this is not the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha said very clearly, and this is a phrase which keeps saying it again and again and again, all consciousnesses, sabba viññāna. Gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, past, future or present, should be seen as it truly is. This is not my permanent essence. So it's all, everything is included here, no exceptions. People always want to try and find exceptions. Anyway, now we go into the definition of these in more detail, of the 5 components of existence, the form or body. And what is the form component of existence? It's the 4 great elements and the physical qualities derived from the 4 great elements. And what are the 4 great elements? Earth, water, fire, and the air element. In the sutras they go to great lengths describing these things, but again, this is all really you need to know, it's just stuff. The experience, Vedana component of existence. There are the 3 types of experience. What are the 3? Pleasant experience through any of the 6 senses, unpleasant experience through any of the 6 senses, and neither unpleasant nor pleasant experience through any of the 6 senses. These are the 3 types of experience. Maybe you might think that's obvious, but it's what's not in there is really important to understand. It's just any experience with the 6 senses. There's not a 7th sense. You can't experience things without any of these 6 senses. It's confined to these 6 senses. And same with perception. There is 6 kinds of perception: sight, sounds, odors, taste, touches, and perception of mental objects. The 4th, the will and other mental formation components of existence. What are volitions? There are the 6 kinds of volition. Will regarding sights, regarding sounds, odors, taste, touches, and regarding mental objects. So when we're talking about these 5 components of existence, how do they interact? You can see even here, just whenever there's any perception or experience, then the will often comes up. And lastly, the consciousness component of existence. And what are consciousnesses? There are these 6 kinds of consciousness: sight, hearing, smell, taste, body, and mind consciousnesses, or smell. All different consciousnesses. 6 different animals, all in the zoo of consciousness. So it's not just consciousness, but consciousnesses. Am I okay? I'm taking you along with me, or yeah?
Can you replace the word consciousnesses with awareness?
You may be able to, but if you do that, it does start to go into the other use of the word awareness, mindfulness, and it can be quite confusing to people. But what you're conscious of, you are aware of to a certain degree. You are mindful of to a certain degree. But because the word awareness and mindfulness are used in other contexts, it may sort of be confusing.
Is psychicness a refined consciousness then?
Psychic, that would be, well, even like psychically you can feel things with your body, hearing. They call, these are the psychic powers, which we come across later on in this word of the Buddha. That's even mentioned, things like hearing things at a distance. And just to make things interesting, that there was one monk I knew when I first went to Thailand who had that power. And he was tested out when he said he could hear people talking about 12 kilometers away. And they, when he made that claim, he said, "You're crazy." And he said, "No, it's true." And I went to check, and it was absolutely true. He had, what they say in the sutras as the divine ear, this incredible hearing. And the problem of what happened with him, though, when he started getting this psychic power, he has obviously incredible meditation, then he thought he was so highly attained. And one day he actually sat in Ajahn Chah's chair and said, "No, well, Ajahn Chah's nobody, I'm the real abbot here." And it was an example of like the pride and the ego which sometimes comes up when you start to attain such things, which is one of the reasons why in monastic Buddhism they are suppressed. If you do get any psychic powers, we don't talk about them that much, especially if a person's still alive. If they're dead, we don't mind. And I was talking in a retreat recently, a really juicy psychic power, which I never saw myself, but the person who told me it, I trust implicitly. She was actually a princess in the Thai royal family, a really good friend. she married a guy who went to the same school as I did. And so she started getting involved in meditation because of the Western monks. And she went to a meditation class every week in Wat Bawon. That's one of the big monasteries in central Bangkok. And it was being taught by this Indonesian monk who I knew. He's now dead. His name was Sudama. And, he did have powers. You could actually feel that. He told me about his experiences. He was the one who got into a deep jhana in the Javan jungle for about 7 or 8 days, and it was a flood. He got totally submerged, didn't know anything about it. So he had really great powers. But imagine this happening on a Saturday afternoon. You hear that, you feel there's something weird going on. So, you open your eyes to take a peek, and this is what this princess did. Opened her eyes to take a peek, and she swore to me, absolutely honestly, she saw rays of light coming out of this monk into one of the people meditating. Real laser eyes. That's pretty cool. And so you want one of the monks here to do that? We wouldn't do that because, once you tell people, we'd be taken off to the lab and all sorts of experiments. We'd be just like a laboratory rat from there on for the rest of our lives, being experimented on. But that's actually true. A monk developed the laser eyes. And that's really cool. So there are such things as psychic powers. So the psychic body, yeah, but that's just a refinement of the ordinary senses. Okay. Now, for Eddie, dependent origination of consciousness. You got something here anyway, Eddie. It's coming up. If the sense of knowing the mind is intact, so your mind, you haven't lost your mind and you're not asleep, but no mind objects come into its range, then there is no manifestation of mind consciousness. If the sense of knowing is intact, mind objects come into its range, but there's no conscious engagement, there's no manifestation of mind objects, but when the sense of knowing is intact, and mind objects come into their range, and there is a constant engagement, then mind consciousness manifests. Mind consciousness isn't sleeping like a cat waiting for a mouse to come into its range. Mind consciousness doesn't even manifest until the mind objects come into the range and there's a manifestation, there's a conscious engagement. And then mind consciousness starts to exist. It's not there beforehand. It's not like a computer which is always ready there for you just once you turn it in and log on. It's literally not there, consciousness, until something happens. It's dependently originated. There's no flame until there's the heat, the wax and the wick. So there's no mind consciousness until there's a sense of knowing, a mind object and its conscious engagement. Dependently arising, not always existing. But when the sense of knowing is intact, okay, mind objects come into its range and there is conscious engagement, then mind consciousness manifests. And so with the other 5 sense consciousnesses. You may have a good sight, but there's nothing to see, such as you're in the darkness, and there's no conscious engagement, which means the sight is not, it's not just waiting, the sight doesn't exist. It's turned off. Or, for example, that you have a sense of eye and an object comes into its range, but you're busy listening to music or something, then you don't see it. Or rather, I would say, the sense of sight is intact, and there's an object, like a person walking towards you, but there's no conscious engagement because you're SMSing on your smartphone, and then there's no conscious engagement, so you don't see the person, you bump into them. Don't know how many times that happens at the airport. I just really disgusting at the airport. You try to walk through the airport, and these people are just texting, and they don't know where they're going, and you just have to really avoid them. It's just like chaos. Anyway, that's my sort of suffering. So, the other 5 consciousness. And consciousness, in particular, is reckoned by the particular condition dependent upon which it arises. When consciousness arises dependent on sight and visual objects, it is reckoned as sight consciousness. When consciousness arises depending on hearing and sounds, it is reckoned as hearing consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent on smell and odors, it is reckoned as smell consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon taste and flavors, it is reckoned as taste consciousness. And when consciousness arises dependent upon touch and tangibles, it is reckoned as touch consciousness. When consciousness arises dependent upon the mind and mind objects, it is reckoned as mind consciousness. All different types of consciousnesses. They are not one and the same. Whatsoever there is of form, this belongs to the form component of existence. Whatever there is of experience belongs to the experience component of existence. Whatsoever there is of perception belongs to the perception component of existence. Whatsoever there are of will and other mental formation, this belongs to the will component of existence. Whatever there is of consciousnesses, this belongs to the consciousnesses component of existence. It's inclusive. The Buddha's kept on saying this to make sure there's no possibility people can find out another type of consciousness outside of the 5 khandhas. And I have here Sankhara. This is, what is the Sankhara component of existence, the 4th khandha? The definition of Sankhara is the 6 types of will, Chaitanakaya, will involved with the objects of the 6 senses. I put this in here to give the sutta reference to Ajahn Brahm supplied this, why we call the 4th khandha will. And that's the sutta which justifies that translation. Now, I don't want to go too far because I think I might be... Okay, I'll just finish off a little bit more. Though someone might say, apart from form, apart from experience, apart from perception, apart from will, I will make known the coming and going of consciousnesses. Their passing away and rebirth, their growth, increase and expansion. That is impossible. In other words, the first 4 of the components of existence, form, in particular body, experience, perception and will, they are fundamental, inseparable from the coming and going of consciousnesses. Just as 2 sheaves of reeds might stand leaning against each other, so too with the objects of consciousness as a condition, consciousness comes to be. With consciousness as a condition, the objects of consciousness come to be. You need both. So if there's no objects of consciousness, consciousness doesn't exist. Without objects of consciousness, consciousness doesn't exist. Without consciousness, objects don't exist. The 2 hold on to each other like sheaves of reeds. Take one away and the other one falls down. So there's no such thing as consciousness without an object. No experience without consciousness. The 2 always go together, but especially the idea of consciousness without an object. That's one sheaf of reed. Sheaf of reeds, it cannot hold up. If one were to remove one of those sheaves of reeds, the other would fall. So too, with the cessation of consciousness, the objects of consciousness cease to exist. With the cessation of the objects of consciousness, consciousness cease to exist. And that is a description of Buddhist meditation. To get consciousnesses to stop, to cease, the objects of consciousnesses have to be subdued, restrained, closing the eyes, be in a quiet place, sitting still. Because they disappear, then the consciousness associated with them disappears. And the mental consciousness, because the objects of the mind get very, very refined, and they'd start to disappear, then following them, the mind consciousness ceases too. The 3 characteristics of existence. All phenomena that arise from a cause do not persist. Anicca. All phenomena that arise from a cause is suffering. All phenomena are without a permanent essence. This is anicca, dukkha, anatta. And to lighten things up a bit, there is the anicca, dukkha, anatta joke. Anicca, dukkha, anatta walk into a pub. All jokes have to start with some people walking into a bar. So anicca, dukkha, anatta walks into a pub. And dukkha says, as soon as he gets into the pub, this bar sucks. Anicca said, don't worry, it will change. And anatta said, who said that? Who said that? That's the anicca, dukkha, anatta joke. Okay, anicca, dukkha, anatta walking into a bar. Dukkha said it sucks. Anicca said, doesn't matter, it won't last. And anatta said, who said that? That's really quite good. Anicca is impermanence. Dukkha is suffering. So dukkha sees suffering. So dukkha walks into the pub and said, I've seen many people I've known for years disintegrating in front of my eyes. It's true. Is what disintegrates suffering or happiness? It is suffering, Venerable Sir. Is what disintegrates is suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus. This is mine, this I am, this is my permanent essence. No, Venerable Sir. It's obvious that what disintegrates, if it really belonged to you, be able to keep it. Okay, you may say you rent it for a while, but if it really was yours, you'd have some power over it. And you can't say this is who you are, disintegrating old body. And certainly, it's obviously illogical to say it is my permanent essence, what is disintegrating and subject to change. Does experience persist or disappear? Perception persist or change? Does will stay the same or come and go and alter? Our consciousness is constant or changing? Always changing, Venerable Sir. Is what is always changing suffering or happiness? Suffering, Venerable Sir. It has to be that, because otherwise, it doesn't always, when you get a nice consciousness, it doesn't last. Is what is inconstant, suffering and subject to change, fit to be regarded thus? This is mine, this I am, this is my permanent essence. No, Venerable Sir. Therefore, any kind of form whatsoever, whether past, future or present, your own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all form should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. This is bodies and other stuff. This I am not. This is not my permanent essence. Any kind of experience whatsoever, whether past, future or present, your own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all experience should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. So if you're really in pain, you're really sick, really disappointed, frustrated, don't worry, it's not yours. If you can really understand that, not just think it as a theory, but actually really take it deeply inside, then pain doesn't affect you. It's not mine. It's not who I am. It's not my essence. Just a passing cloud, even though it may be a black cloud. Because when we attach that experience, we're in trouble. Any kind of perception whatsoever, past, future or present, your own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all perception should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine. It's not who I am. This is not my permanent essence. Any kind of will whatsoever, past, future or present, your own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all will should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. Any kind of consciousness whatsoever, whether past, future or present, your own or others, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, all consciousnesses, there should be an ES there, should be seen as it really is with correct wisdom. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not my permanent essence. Now I think I'm going to stop there because that's heavy stuff when I take away all the fluff and all the repetition. I don't know about you, but that's really tough stuff and it can hit you quite hard. So I'm going to leave you with that for today. It's going to carry on the next time, Anatta Doctrine. I believe this is it on the, we can actually put all of this on the website so people can actually look at it the day before and check out what happened today. I think that'd be a very useful thing to do. It's on that computer anyway. Can we upload the whole thing onto the website? So, because the next time which I give a sutta class, it'll be carrying on from where I left off. Okay, now some general questions. A permanent essence, there is no such thing as a permanent essence. But what it is actually meaning, like, who are you really? Now, when you strip away all the stuff which comes and goes, you know, once you were a young lady, now you're still a young lady, but not so young. I had to backtrack there pretty quickly. You know that things are changing, so you know, your body is not who you are.
Yeah, but the essence within you.
So you go inside. What actually is there in you which is actually permanent, the real you, which is the same, will always be today, tomorrow, next year, in your next life? Is there a permanent
Could
essence?
there be a permanent of kindness or a permanent of...
This is what we're proving here, that actually, no. Everything is totally in change. Kindness comes and kindness goes.
Mm.
It gets very strong, lasts a long time, but it won't be there forever. Ah, what a shame. But it'll go to other people. Other people take on the kindness. Okay, next one. Okay. Yeah, no, whoever, you got the microphone, so you got the power.
I was going to ask, can the other consciousnesses exist without the mind consciousness?
Very good question. Yes, they can, but you don't know they exist. I think like in psychology, they can actually probably prove that, even if you're... can you prove that? If you're not paying attention, you're paying attention to, say, seeing, but then sort of somebody touches you, you actually, you know, you're actually... What is a good... Yeah, for example, that you're paying attention to watching a football match or something, and then you have other things which happen to your senses. It's seen subconsciously, it happens. So it is registered, but you don't notice it at the time.
Okay, thank you.
I think the answer would be you can. Okay, next question from the floor, first of all. Did you have one? John? Yeah, go on.
Just pretty simple. Are you going to put this into a book, this new translation?
I hope to already, because I've been doing this at the Rains Retreat. Sister Chanda, she liked it very much, and she wanted to raise some money for a monastery over in England. So I said, okay, she's already claimed the royalties for it, even though it's not been printed or published or anything yet. So we've already decided where the royalties are going to go if we do publish it. I thought it might be useful, but I'm checking it out to see whether you like it, whether it's a good thing. It's a totally new type of translation, and if you compare it with the old one, you find out, and it's, I don't know why other people can't modernize these things. Why keep calling it the Lord or the Tathagata? It's a Buddha, for goodness sake. Instead of monks all the time, bhikkhus, community, because that's inclusive. And changing some words to make it really punchy. Yes. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I'm sorry I sold the rights away already. Should go to the
I just want to
BSWA.
talk to you about that later. I just had a question following on from Chris's about perception and perception. You said that you had to go through the jhanas all the way to the top, so to speak. I've been doing a lot of reading around Zen Buddhism at the moment, and they their model is a satori experience. So they don't seem to do jhanas at all, and then they persist and persist and persist for years, and then one day, bang, in meditation they have the satori, which is just this sort of one event. But in Theravada, it's a series of steps through the jhanas. So I just wonder how you would interpret what those Zen monks are saying in regards to enlightenment.
Again, it's Zen, comes from Chan. That was the Chinese form of Zen. And Chan is the Sanskrit word for jhana. So they actually carry the name, the jhana tradition. So that's where it originated from. But just to have one great insight and think that's the meaning of things, many people have had that. And I told you, that's actually in one of my books, when I had my great Satori experience, 4 years as a monk, and everything became really clear. I really thought I was enlightened. You can read the whole story, because it's very self-deprecating, until the food came that morning. And usually we just had rotten fish curry, but that morning there was another pot of curry. It was actually, sorry for you vegetarians, there was no vegetarian food around in Thailand in those days. And the other food was like a pork curry from town. We never had that. It was really rare. And straight away I thought the heavenly beings were also celebrating my enlightenment. And I thought, wow, this is great, because it was such a rare event. And I was number 2 monk, and the head monk, a local boy, he's actually from that local village. He should have liked the rotten fish curry. He grew up on it. That was the local dish. And he never took any rotten fish curry. He took these incredible big ladles. No one could eat that much of the pork curry. He sloshed it into his bowl. But I wasn't concerned about that, because there's plenty left, of the pork curry. But what he did next was absolutely unforgivable. He took what was left of the pork curry and he poured it into the rotten fish curry, stirred it up, and said, "It's all the same, it's all the same." And what a hypocrite! If it was all the same, why didn't he pour it in and mix it up before he took his? And he spoiled my celebratory meal for being an arahat, doesn't worry about food. And that was the point. Oh no, I'm not fully enlightened after all. But it really felt like it for a long time. Had all the, no sloth and torpor, incredible energy, absolutely imperturbable. That was great. It's a shame it didn't last that long. So that is actually what these Satoris are. And the only way you can find out if they're the real thing is if they really persist over years. So just one great insight is not enough. Oh, from overseas. Is there one from over? Oh, you're not overseas. You live in Bull Creek. That's not really count overseas. Very good. Here we go. Wow. 3. Suvi from Finland. What Ajahn Brahm thinks about intuition? Intuition is actually a subverbal knowledge, and a lot of times it's actually coming up from all your past experiences of life. I really love intuition. It is when you have to make a decision and you usually don't think about it, you allow the answer to come to you. So it is like an insight, but it's always, for me, intuition is pushing aside all the thoughts and seeing things much more deeper. And my usual exercise to show what I mean by intuition, I hold up something. It's usually a bottle of water. Today it's a cup of water. And I ask people, I go through this quickly, you've done it before, what is it I'm holding up? And people say, glass. What else do you see? Water. What else do you see? Maybe about 3 inches, like a truncated cone, glass. What else do you see? I can see reflections of the light. What else do you see? About 3/4 full. What else do you see? The longer you ask, the more you see. But after a while of pushing you to ask what you see in this thing I'm holding up, you get to a point where all your knowledge is exhausted. You've got no more words to describe what you see. And that's where intuition starts. When all the labels and all the words have been exhausted, you start to see things in a different way. Trouble is, all we're taught is to give things names and labels. When I say, what is this? Glass, we think that's what it is. That's just labels. That's not seeing deeply enough. When all your names, all your conceptions are exhausted, that's when intuition can come up. I just mentioned Venerable Chanda. She's actually listening. I do apologise for the thing about saying that you've already got the rights to this, Venerable. I'm busted. She's actually listening. She asked a question from Germany. What would you say to people who believe that the goal of Buddhism is to get to a state of pure awareness? Is there such a thing as awareness which is unattached? Absolutely not. What do you mean by pure awareness? Are you talking about awareness as being consciousness? And all consciousness, said the Buddha, I just read it out, is suffering. That's what the Buddha said. So if you think pure awareness, is the answer to stuff, you haven't really listened to what the Buddha's been saying. Because one has been attached to a sense of self. That's why these teachings are hard to understand. So is there such a thing as an awareness which is unattached? Don't call it about attachment, call it about a fuel. All awareness becomes a fuel for further existence. So you're not free. Dear Kevin from the United States, Ajahn Chah talked about pure mind. The mind will reach its natural state, no discriminating between good and bad, hot and cold, fast and slow, no me, no you, no self. Is this mind is real mind? Of course it is not. I lived with Ajahn Chah for 9 years, and sometimes some of the translations of what he said say more about the translator than they do about what Ajahn Chah said. And a good example of this, so people translate because Ajahn Chah's name sells. But knowing the Thai, what he actually said, a lot of times what you read in the translations is not what Ajahn Chah said. So please be careful there. I lived with him. What he did say again and again, he didn't talk about pure mind. I don't think he ever mentioned the word pure mind in Pali. He just said that the nature of ultimate reality is just Wang. Wang, he said, empty, nothing there, gone, finished, Wang. Which means basically emptiness. The mind will reach its natural state, no discriminating between good and bad, hot, cold, fast and slow, no me, you, no self. That mind is the real mind. You try that. Next time you have a shower, no discriminating between hot and cold. You'll burn yourself under the shower. That's not the real mind. So the mind does discriminate. That's its very nature. But if you let go of discrimination, you are letting go of the mind itself. The mind vanishes when you let go. It's the word for consciousness is, in Pali, is vijnana. Jnana means knowing. Vi, is exactly the same as the word in English, the prefix bi, like bicycle or binary numbers, bifocals. It means two. And much of Pali actually, has come into English. The English is an Indo-Aryan, in the Indo-Aryan group of languages. So much of Pali you can actually recognize in English, like vi, by, two. So it means two knowings. Vijnana, it does mean discriminatory. Knowledge has to separate. So knowing has to separate into hot, cold, into light, dark, into happiness, unhappiness. Because if that doesn't happen, vijnana stops. That's the nature of consciousness, to separate, discriminate, to be dual. It cannot be anything else. If you take away that function, then it stops. Consciousness ends. It's vijnana. And the other word for mind in Pali is mana. You were saying that the other day, manas, in Hindu. That comes from the root word meaning to measure. That's what it means. Manati is to measure. Mana is mind. That's what the mind does. It measures stuff. Like, dislike, good, bad, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It measures. which is why if you stop measuring stuff, you let things be, no discrimination, your mind stops, it ceases. You can't survive that. It's what the mind does, its function, is to discriminate. I liked today's talk, I didn't like today's talk. That's what your mind does. You can't stop it. Nibbana is when everything stops, yes. No measure, nothing left, yes. Finished. Stop. Poof. The monkey mind never stops. So, but be careful, because sometimes in Buddhism when we mention monkey mind, it's quite offensive to our primate brothers and sisters in the monkey world. Give them a break, poor monkeys. They were born with a monkey mind. Yeah, naughty mind or whatever. So anyway, that is from... I was going to say, interesting experience, anecdotal, and this is praising my predecessor, Ajahn Jakaro, because at Ajahn Chah's funeral service, you know, they hang out there for a couple of days, and it's a very nice anecdote, because, as you would expect, I was with Ajahn Chah for about 8-9 years, and we were all having a discussion. What did Ajahn Chah teach? Did he teach pure mind, or did he teach nothingness? What did he teach? And there was a big argument between all the monks. What did Ajahn Chah actually teach? Because, and then Ajahn Jakaro, really wisely, he said, there are 1,000 Ajahn Chahs, because every disciple remembered something from Ajahn Chah which he thought was important and interesting. And other stuff we just didn't even get to our perception. So he said there are hundreds, as many disciples of Ajahn Chah, that's how many different teachings there are. It's just so wise. So what did Ajahn Chah say? I've got Ajahn Brahm's version of Ajahn Chah, and there are hundreds of other versions of Ajahn Chah, what he said. Because we all know what we could understand, what we could see, that's what we remembered. Things which were beyond us, we just didn't even remember. So that's why when you quote other people, it's great with the Buddha because at least you got it in black and white. But some of the translations of some of his talks are just, I remember this one translation which was done by a monk, and I remember reading it and said, what? That's not what Ajahn Chah said. I was there when he gave that talk. And the monk said, oh yeah, but I think this is what Ajahn Chah wanted to say. And you've got to be very careful there with translating. Okay, so hopefully that answered the questions, and especially from Venerable Chanda from Germany. She was a Chanda here doing the... Please, again, I'm very happy that if we do put this into a book, the royalties go to the Bhikkhuni project in England, because they need it more than others. Okay, any other questions from here before we finish off? Great. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. You can give me some comments later on if you thought it was too long, too deep, more pause for questions, or what you think we should do with this. But it's a new translation. I'll put everything on the web. You can actually have a look at it yourself later on and to see if you like it. Thanks very much. Sadhu, sadhu. Okay, let's do the Arahant now.